Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chandrakant Kamath, Chandra in short. As all of you have already been aware that as part of this Game Changers event, we have been discussing on various BFSI industry-related topics. Most of the topics have been largely different to what we are going to discuss now. As this event draws to a close, we would like to bring forward this important discussion, which is related to ethics and values, as you may have heard the ladies speaking. We are going to discuss how we, as C-suite executives or C-suite leaders, are able to do it, or we plan to do it, integration of ethics and values in our system or in the way we work. With that, I think I should be able to speak. I'll request various gentlemen to speak up on this topic. The first question I think which I'd like to ask is, as industry leaders, how do you think we can balance business priorities with ethical values? Between the two, what is it that you would prioritize more, or would you say they are equal? Are there situations where you have to make tough calls between profit and ethics? Mr. Shastri.
Thank you, sir. This was not expected, but anyway, very warm welcome and a good morning to everyone. So, when it comes to ethics as a whole, I guess that revolves around 5 to 6 parameters, which is like we call fairness, respect, integrity, maybe a transparency, trustworthiness, and honesty. Among all these parameters, I guess for an individual, C-level executive individual or a leader, he has to manage the 3 C's: character, competency, and commitment. Character in the sense, we have witnessed that most of the times if something goes well, we have seen the executives are like, yes, this I have done. But if something goes wrong, they pass on the blame to the team. Over here, characters comes into picture for an executive. When it comes to commitment, I guess ethics as a whole depend upon your organization framework. If your organization framework pertaining to ethics and values are pakka, I don't think an individual or two can able to change it. Commitment will again carried by the organization framework only. However, as an individual, I should be first committed to organization goal, then I should be committed to my team goal, and of course, last but not the least, self-driven goal. So overall, if we consider those 7 fridge and 3 C's, I guess the rest of the things will fall in place. Profit and all this thing, you need not be in a position that I have to take a call. You have to just follow the process, follow the framework. I guess the rest of the things will fall in place automatically. That's my submission from regarding ethics vis-a-vis profit or maybe your organization.
I also agree with it broadly. As they say, where the head goes, body follows. So what this means primarily is the perception lead to action. So you as a leader need to be a role model first. You need to make people understand what values are. People will look up to you, learn from you, and then when they see what they perceive, what values are, they also inculcate those values in their daily lives. So similarly, at Access, similar kind of thoughts we have. We have our value programs defined very clearly. We have 5 values that we are driving, which are again teamwork, ownership, transparency. Then we have certain values which are primarily linked to your business priorities as well. When you own up your project, when you own up your work, definitely you will tend to do better than others who are not owning up their work or the project that they are doing on. So we have. So how do you implement those values on ground? primarily you take two-step approach. You first understand and come up with a list of values that you want to make people understand. So first you make those values clear. You put it on a piece of paper. You make people understand what those values are through case studies. You train people, let them know what those values are actually about. Then you evaluate if the people are actually leading through those values or not. So both implementation and evaluation is very important when you are thinking of like your organization is trying to inculcate those values in their daily lives.
Good points. Good points. I think Rushi or Mr. Shastri spoke about multiple topics, multiple points, and I think integrity is something which he touched upon. And yourself, you did mention about leading by example. Very important points, both of them. I personally feel integrity is one thread which I think integrates the rest of the values. If you don't have integrity, I don't think the rest of the values matter. Without integrity, I think it is just like remaining values are of actually no use.
I can
We'll,
just add.
yeah, please add on. Yeah.
Well, at the outset, and great thoughts from you. Let's break this down further. I mean, we are not many crowd out there. We can crowdsource our thoughts. So to start with, I think we just hear from the news on CNN, BBC, stating that US is in financial crisis. It's on the brink of financial crisis. Well, I think battling inflation is what many countries are doing today. But at the outset, I think having to increase on the interest rates is creating an interest risk, which in fact has made certain banks go down, like SVB, right? And essentially, I think if we go a decade back into the 2020s, what we can in fact see is that banks like Merrill Lynch or BCCI, when essentially they went bankrupt, the reason why they went bankrupt is because they went through certain fraudulent practices. And if we further break this down, when the chieftains, like the CX of both these firms, corporations, were interviewed, what they said was, we never got to know the intelligibility around accounting data. My peers or our peers, as well as, perhaps their business intelligence, which in fact was supposed to show up their accounting data, has in fact, not provided the right insights for them to take the right decision, is what in fact has been stated by them. So essentially, I think there is an information asymmetry within the organization, which in fact has, floated across to the C-level, and the board was also not being informed on the right metrics. So how do we solve for this information asymmetry? While there are corporate governance mechanisms, essentially transparency, accounting practices, audit, all of these aspects, but I think it's more about having to look at it in a formal way. Ethics, as stated by a study in Greece across 280 organizations, in fact can strengthen the corporate governance principles across the board, as well as the management, including the CX. However, I think there has not been any further empirical evidence which states that ethics, in fact, can strengthen the corporate governance structure apart from Greece.
Very correct.
Now, if there is some research which anyone in India is able to do, that will be excellent. I'll be interested in having to do it myself, because I believe that it has an influence on corporate governance code. And certain studies, in fact, have stated that values can act as a medium to be able to influence the corporate performance of the board as well as the C-level. But however, it can't operate in isolation. It has to have compliance, working along with values to be able to strengthen, the corporate governance code. So that is my 2 cents.
Very true. Very true. Moving on, Mr. Bagchi, if you would like to please give your 2 paise or 2 cents on this topic. More pointedly, which policies or initiatives do you think you have taken or you plan to put into place within your leadership arena or in your organization to promote diversity, inclusion, and work-life balance? I'm sure you will agree that all 3 points are kind of major topics of discussion and concern.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chandra, and thank you, everyone. To DNI, as we call diversity and inclusion, and again, you mentioned about the work-life balance part of it. So let me qualify how we see it. Things have moved ahead from that aspect of just diversity and then to inclusion, and now the stage where we are in, it's about belongingness. So if you just imagine, it's like almost like coming to a family kind of a scenario, right? So when we talk about diversity, we talk about, there was a stage where we used to talk about diversity only in terms of inherited diversity, which is your gender, which is your background, etc. So currently, when we look at our DNI approach, we just not consider the diversity. So just to give you a background, right? So we are like, as BalanceHero, we are a fintech firm. So for us, the way we appreciate diversity, therefore, is not just like what you have inherited as a gender or as a background. It is the thought processes, it is the acquired diversity by virtue of your pedigree, by virtue of your education, experience, everything put together. So when you are inside a room, the enrichment of diversity which you can capitalize on is not just on the merit of like a diversity in terms of gender, race, or any other socioeconomic background, but it's also about the acquired diversity which you have gathered in. So that's point number one. When we look at diversity, we look at the lens of inherited and acquired diversity as well. When it comes to inclusiveness, it's the journey which begins from there on. But our realization also has been there that inclusiveness is, by and large, it becomes a one-way effort. So you need to kind of have as an outcome of belongingness. So in our DNI policy, the way we kind of qualify is not just about diversity and inclusiveness, but also a sense of belongingness, and that's our major criteria. When it comes to work-life balance, we don't see it as a balance, we see it as an integration. So we call it something like a work-life integration. Because in today's day and age, we cannot just have conversations in different kind of a spectrum saying that, hey, is this a work-life balance where you shut it down and open it up? Let's face it, guys, in today's world, yes, we all want to kind of draw certain lines, but always it's not a possibility. So the flexibility what we provide and the flexibility which we want to kind of come across is like more of an integration. So the choice is there at the hand of the individual. There is no set criteria saying that, 5 o'clock there is no communication. No, there could be certain scenarios where maybe a mom or a dad has to go and pick the kid, and therefore he or she wants to kind of actually log in after 7 o'clock and wrap up his or her work. So that's the way we look at it. When it comes to work-life balance, our entire approach, and to be honest, Chandra, more than the policy, it's the culture and the tone which is set at the top. Policies, it has to be a living document, but the policies are only contours. So when it comes to work-life integration and also in practice of DNI, is how we set the culture and the tone at the top, and how we ourselves kind of set the examples. We can say a lot of things, but till the time we ourselves don't set the examples, people will not get that comfort. People will always have an apprehension of being judged or being otherwise taken differently. So however you amplify in the policy document, it's about the how you set the example at the top.
Correct. Again, you're talking on the same point, or rather touching on the same point, that leading from the front and setting right examples. Mr. Aggarwal, your insights on this, please.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I would just like to add on the previous question as well. See, when you're talking about ethics and profits in the previous discussion which we had, I believe it's not an either or situation. There's no trade in between ethics or profit. Profit is nothing but a summation of an output of whatever you do. Now, why do we start a business? Why do we want to be in business? We basically start or think of a business because we want to solve a problem. We want to give a solution. Either it could be to a public or to a customer segment or to a technology problem or to any problem we want to face. Now, ethics is something which is a core principle how you develop your business. And the more earlier phase in the organization you put it as a non-negotiable part, the better it will be for long-term sustainability. We have a no-nonsense approach towards anything which is, related, even borderly close comes to ethic violation. We are in the financial services industry. We deal with money. Raw material is money, end product is money. So ethics is something which is beyond profit. I mean, there have been many scenarios where as an organization, we have seen within my organization and also as an industry, people are willing to compromise and sacrifice profit. But ethics is something which is non-negotiable, and that is something which would take the organization to a long-term sustainable existence. Forget about even profit. Today, if ethics is compromised, your existence can be questionable. Leave alone your name in the market, your goodwill you enjoy between your peers in the industry group or customer segment, but your own existence will become a question mark if at all there's anything compromised on ethics. The role of leadership is to facilitate that, to ensure that a guy who's strong on ethics is being given that credit, that recognition, that yes, he has taken a call, maybe not in the interest of business, but it is an ethical call and an ethical decision. As leadership, the way we amplify that, the way we celebrate that, the way we promote that within the organization is what will lead to a cultural development of ethical practices. Coming back to the second topic, which was about diversity and work-life balance. Yes, it all flows down from the DNA of ethics, giving equal opportunity to all. Now, equal is a very abused word, so equality or equity, we don't know. But yes, as everybody's background may not be the same in terms of birth, race, gender, or their social economic background. But yes, are we giving an equal opportunity? Are we creating enough avenues for that person to be productive in whatever capacity he comes from and whatever his deliverables are? Basic, simple things which are taken for granted now, as my co-panelist was mentioning, work-life integration, work-life balance. Yeah, we start from basic things, flexi timing. People are not bound by a rigid rule. Okay, 9, 10, come in, otherwise half day. Those were the Draconian times. A feudal age is when companies used to work like that. Today, you can't run an organization, by policing everybody. It has to be more of a participative organization. You have to give flexible. COVID has taught us work from home. I mean, earlier for a supervisor to trust his team whether he's working from home was a question mark. But today we have all come of age and we've seen 2 years of work life happening from home.
Correct.
So work from home is what it is. It is
Correct.
actually trusting your employee that he's working.
Yeah.
So if you are able to create a culture of trust, create a culture of belief, and have a participative engagement, then work-life integration happens, work-life balance happens. End of the day, you want the work to be done. You don't want that 8 hours, did you clock in or not? I mean, how does it matter? If the work is done, it is done. If it is done in 6 hours, so be it. Sometimes it takes 10 and 12 hours also. So that is how the business works. So I think as a thread, common thread, ethics, values go a long way in fulfilling all these aspirations in an organization. Thank you.
Correct. So in a nutshell, I think Mr. Aggarwal, you're saying, or long story short, instead of police, we participate. Yeah, very nicely put. Thank you. So far in our discussion, I think we have largely been talking from an employee perspective. Let's take the next step and see how we can integrate ethics and values into the reason why we are in business, basically for solving problems for customers. Amit, would you like to share your views on that?
I was just sharing to the IDBI CTO and the director, and they're kind of very true that we are going into a technology world, and now the banking system is going to be more like a technology company with a banking license. And with this, we have to accept that the new talent which is been coming up, they are having a very different kind of energy, and taming that energy as a leader and using them into the right direction is being very, very difficult, or probably you can say that it's going to be, because attracting a good talent into a bank is again going to be a bigger problem these days. So as a leader, we just need to see that how do we need to take that particular energy, considering all the ethics and values of a bank, and then use them in a particular direction. So I have seen personally that the new blood, or probably the new age technologies, where we want people to come from IITs, or probably the institutional, or maybe the startup or fintech of this world. They people won't put that ethics and all of these values on top of many things, because being into a bank, we are being compliant by multiple authorities, and something like जब हाथी चलता है धीरे चलता है, तो हमारे साथ में बैंक के अंदर कुछ है. In this case, we just need to make sure that we wanted to take the best output, but again, they people has to do something which has been required. Okay. On top of this, somebody was talking to me yesterday that how do we expedite the vendor management process and how do we expedite multiple other things which a bank can do. So again, banks are been working in silos. Now, as a next step, specifically in our bank, we just try to create that silos, and we just try to kill that silos. So in this case, something which is going in one department, another department, so they all are actually going into a centralized place, and that's how whatever is being required specifically from process perspective, from ethics perspective, taken care by a central unit, rather than individual will have their own laws and processes.
Thank you, Amit. Nicely put. But if you could also touch on the customer trust and the reputation angle, that would also be helpful.
Okay. When you say about the customer trust and customer value, so I just give you an example. We are creating a product which is already been backed by Kotak, but that product was a new one. And in this case, the customer is being hesitant to put their PAN number onto the platform. So even it's been backed by a bigger company like Kotak, still the platform, the people want the platform should be compliant. So we have taken up the ISO compliant, we have taken up all the required compliant, and then try to build the customer trust that even being we are the bank, don't think that we are just the bank. We are actually being compliant with all the centralized authorities. You can actually put your PAN number and we are equally being compliant along with you.
Good to know.
Yeah. So Chandra, if I may add on to just the customer part of it, see, overall what we are talking is about ethical dilemma, right? So when we are in the business, this aspect of ethical dilemma, especially as leaders, it's quite omnipresent. If you break down into quarters of it, right? So one quarter would be like your business partners, possibly one quarter would be like internally how you want to kind of run the organization, your people, your employees, and that aspect which you are asking about is the customer. Now, if you just take a very closer lens to it, right? Your responsibility, your ethical responsibility towards your customer probably has the least weightage of you going through the ethical dilemma. You can have certain considerations, narratives with a vendor, business partner, authorities, and all that. That's a fact. We all know that. But when it comes to the customer, it's you. So where it starts from, and taking also a leaf of what Alok also was mentioning, it starts with the purpose. So what is your purpose? If your purpose is only making money at any cost, then you will land up in actually doing a trust deficit with the customer by your act. But if your purpose is like, no, for example, we are into the business of lending. So if our purpose is like, we have to kind of do finance for all, extend the credit, our trustworthiness will actually happen when we deliver what the customer is promised for. Our trustworthiness will happen when we actually know, like when the customer is actually trusting us with his or her data, are we the responsible custodian? And it all drives from purpose. If the purpose is like actually adding value and not, let's say, privilege of data or monetizing it in a different way, then you are crossing the line. So in all these 3 quarters of a business partnership, internal and towards the customer, we need to be very, very clear that when it comes to the customer part of it, it's us, the purpose which you have set up the organization for, and the culture. There is no way you can be negotiated otherwise. I have been fortunate enough as an individual to start my career with the Tatas 23 years back. I know it's possible. So I just wanted to add on the customer
It's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
I guess BFSI per se, sir, customer trust is, as we are confined to technological discussion, I guess those are the days gone. If any organization is not able to retain the customer trust, it is going to impact particular organization. I guess these days trust technologically per se is going to impact your entire ecosystem. So say for example, tomorrow's age back mobile banking got compromised, it will have the multiplier impact in entire ecosystem. And I guess those are the days gone when your BFSI players were involved in the traditional activities like cash, deposits, investment. I guess coming ahead will be, we have to rely on 3 parameters, that is identity, information, and experience. So identity, maintaining the identity or trust of the customer or the interest of the customer is a need of an hour. And that's not confined to your individual organization. It's confined to your ecosystem. In fact, sooner or later, even regulator will come into picture and they will come up with framework, a trust framework wherein we already interoperable solutions like UPIs and all these things, we have to follow the regulatory framework. But nevertheless, sooner or later, regulator may come up with the framework when everything and anything, communication between the applications, verticals, we have to follow those standards and maintain that interoperable customer success so that ecosystem is healthy. That's what my submission going ahead.
Yeah, and I think the regulator has already stepped in. Not now. It's not a trend of the times, but it's been an ongoing thing. Any other points any of you would like to add before we close?
Yeah,
or maybe even give some closing comments.
just a quick,
on the topic of
Yeah, go ahead, please. Tejasvi,
I'll
please
just
go
take
ahead.
a quick minute, perhaps. Essentially, I think we talked about information asymmetry, which in fact is perhaps the cause of most of financial crisis. Now, let's take an example of how do we imbibe ethics into an organization. So at the outset, I think there is a code of conduct, which essentially most corporations, like even HDFC does it. We get the employees to submit to a code of ethics, which essentially, they're supposed to read, and they're not supposed to skip something, and it's monitored. So that essentially should be able to get ethics to the grassroots. But however, I think in reality, how many employees get to imbibe the principles of whatever they read into whatever they do in their daily actions?
Very true.
And that is strategic, right? That's a control mechanism which we are using to be able to say that the employees get to be ethical. And the board is a monitoring mechanism which in fact has been appointed by the shareholders to be able to say that the C level is in fact acting ethically in every direction as well as decision that they're taking. Correct. So again, we as leadership will have to imbibe these values in every decision that we take. And essentially, I think I'll talk about 4 conflicts which in fact can appear in.
Kindly take note of the time.
Yeah. Quick minute. In day-to-day operations, perhaps. And at the outset, I think there can be conflicts between compliance and ethics. There can be conflicts between ethics and internal audit.
Correct.
There can be, again, a conflict between ethics and project governance in terms of which vendor is being chosen. So essentially, I think if these conflicts are, monitored with specific direction being given by the C-level, that in fact is gonna reduce on most of the friction that can be caused in taking the right decision.
Very well summarized. Go ahead.
And it's also important to be able to have the C-level here to set up formal data governance functions. I think essentially I was speaking to Shiva yesterday. He's a CDO. I was asking him, is a CDO a chief digital officer or a chief data officer? Because across the globe, a CDO means a chief data officer. But in India, it means a chief digital officer. Essentially, we need to invest into data management, governance.
Correct.
To be able to reduce on our information asymmetry. I mean, in India, banks are stronger, but that doesn't necessarily give us the leeway to be able to say that, we don't need to govern it to reduce information asymmetry. And that's something which through HDFC we have done. We have put a data trust framework. We ensure that all the critical data, in fact, is Sigma 6, which is being used to make decisions. We also get to identify what is the trust associated with each data, which can be customer data, regulatory data, or financial data, so that the shareholders get to percolate the trust that internal employees are having today. So that.
Thank you, Tejasvi. Appreciated. And HDFC has always been the flag bearer of the Indian banking system. Good to know that. Alok, some closing comments from you. Very quickly, please.
Closing comments, as all my co-panelists said, today we are talking about customer as your question was, but I will just reframe it to stakeholders. All stakeholders, customers, employees, regulators, investors, and compliance agencies. If we are talking about trust, it is about what expectations we have created by our communication, and are we able to deliver on those expectations. So if we are very honest with what we take to the table, we'll be able to deliver that to the table, and that will create trust. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to an end of this very valuable session. Thank you, everybody, for your insights and your words.